on time? Gotta love CJ. They are punctual. We're good to go? Okay, good morning. As you may have just heard me finish the thought, if there's any subject matter that you want to be punctual about, it's CJ. I'm Chris Pellerito with Mid-Michigan College. Thank you for joining us. And if you're wondering, for any reason, why we're doing this, I'll tell you this answer. When people ask me about what I do for Mid, I reference Tom Brady and I tell them, you know why Tom Brady still plays at such a high level? Because he can. We're doing this morning because we can and because it matters. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask each of our remarkable guests, and I'm not sugarcoating it. They are remarkable, as you'll find in a few minutes. I'm going to ask them to sort of introduce themselves as we dip into the first responses to the first questions. This is, by the way, the first of two of these events we're doing for CJ with Mid-Michigan College, and we're happy to host. And then additionally, we've got an event coming on March 6th that we'll talk about a little bit later as well. Okay? Fair enough. And once more, I'll remind you, teachers are aware, but you're welcome to submit questions or comments or concerns. My wonderful, much brighter colleague, Beth, is personing the laptop, taking those. So feel free to send those as we're going. Some of you were kind enough to send some thoughts in advance, and we'll work with those too. Okay? So the appropriate way to start might be to say, well, ladies first. But I want to start with Brandon, not because he's the rookie here, but I asked this question of Lieutenant Lader, Josh, and Dr. Moore, Karen, last year. But I'm going to start with Brandon because it's why we're here. Brandon, I told you this was coming. There are 217 and 18-year-olds who think CJ today, and thank you for considering that level of commitment. There's a lot of people that would say, Brandon, why CJ? Of all the times in history, why today, why CJ? What would you say to that?
As in, why did I do it, or why should they do it?
Little of both.
For me, I wasn't on this path. I applaud them for knowing this early on what they want to do, right? I wasn't on this path. I actually went to become a teacher. I was teaching in a classroom when the planes hit the Twin Towers in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided I was going to go out and do something different. That was honestly, when people say life-changing event, that was a life-changing event. I started in the fire service and became a part-time firefighter while I was working summers with the Department of Natural Resources.
You might have your mic muted on your pack there. Let's take a look here. There's like a mute button on the top.
Nothing like live.
Do you want to just run with this one? That's apparently the level on that's real loud. Can we just switch the handheld one for right now?
Oh, sure.
All right. Sorry.
Go
about
here.
That.
Is that going to work? Thank you, Noah. Brandon, introduce yourself too. What's your role?
Okay. So I am the lieutenant for the Department of Natural Resources out of the Roscommon District. So that would be the district law supervisor that covers the conservation officers that work in central northern Michigan in an 11-county area. So
it's a lot of territory.
Yeah. But back on your question there, it basically started, I was a teacher in a classroom when September 11, 2001 hit, and watching all those kids look at the planes hit the Twin Towers and their shock and the days that followed that. Mm-hmm. I knew, because I had worked through the summers as a park ranger with the DNR, that I loved the service aspect of serving, but I still thought I wanted to be a teacher until that event, and I went back into the fire service as a part-time firefighter. I actually have done a couple other police jobs with a city police department and a county sheriff's department, and now do this. So my calling for public service was probably there but buried, and it probably came alive when a major incident like that happened.
Yeah.
But as far as I would piggyback that on why they should do it is for that same reason. We're in a time where we need that help. We need help in public service, people that are good people that know this is their calling and this is what they want to do. And if they know that this early on, they probably have had that buried in them too. And so I think that it's a great thing for them to reach out and explore that and go to these sessions and see what comes from it.
Josh and Karen, jump in here if you care to. It's pretty well known. There's a great deal of anxiety worldwide nowadays. I know for me and for a lot of folks, there's probably a little bit lowering of that anxiety level because law enforcement exists. And I realize that's a kind of a tricky line to walk right now, because a lot of people would say, no, law enforcement isn't helping the situation. But how would you respond to those people that say, law enforcement can absolutely help the situation in general, and what you're seeing on the news or what you're hearing is just a tiny little speck, and it's not reality for law enforcement? Thoughts?
Sure, Chris. For those that haven't met me, my name is Josh Lader, and I'm the post commander for the State Police Post here in Mount Pleasant, and I've got about 24 years of working with fine people like these two right here. I think for people coming into criminal justice in this world, the key to that is understanding the difference between saying, I'm going into law enforcement and I'm going into policing. Because if we come into it, if you're 17, 18, and say, I'm going to go into law enforcement, here's a law, you broke it, I'm enforcing. That's not the mindset that when the lieutenant here and I are recruiting that we're looking for. We're looking for those people that see the world, they see some chaos, they see some anxiety, and they say, what is really policing? Policing is holding people accountable to the law, but it's also when you see someone go through a critical incident and you take time and get on a knee and you can talk to that small child, put them at ease, let them know they're going to be okay. It's after a crash, taking the time to talk to that family and see if there's anyone else they want contacted. It's in uniform on a day like today at your local college, taking time to talk about things like this, because this is policing. Policing, when you go into it, is saying, what in my community is a need? Constantly assessing those needs and saying, what resources do we have as a team that we can pool and bring to help solve that problem? So I think the perception of young men and women coming in today with the policing mindset of, yes, I'll hold someone accountable, I'll keep people safe, but I'm here to do whatever's necessary to help solve those social problems where I have the power to solve it. I think that's the key to walking that dichotomy between law enforcement and kind of social assistant. We're still sheepdogs. We're still protecting the flock. We'll still take the wolves head on. But at the same time, we want to be sheepdogs that the sheep are a little more comfortable with.
Yeah, sheepdogs. You said it. That's good, though. I'm never going to forget that one. Anything you want to add?
No.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Karen Moore, and I come from a different perspective from the gentleman here. I have a law degree, and I'm a former prosecutor and a former defense attorney. Been teaching in criminal justice since 2001. If you see my belt here, I don't have the protective equipment that these gentlemen have, and so my perspective is different. And when we look at what criminal justice, the program is, oftentimes we think about who wants to be a police officer, who wants to be a corrections officer. My perspective is those are absolutely wonderful careers. To answer the question, should something happen right now in this room, I know where the closest door is, and I'm going out. These two gentlemen are going to walk toward that. That's the society that I want to live in. I want to live in where good people do have that calling to serve and say, this is my purpose. I'm going to make this world a better place. And I truly believe 99.9% of the people in law enforcement come in, and I'm sorry, you're right, not law enforcement, policing, sorry, Lieutenant, that's a much better term, but they come in because of that calling. Any career has those bad apples, and unfortunately, we're in a society of people catch things on their cell phone and put it out on the internet. Day-to-day safety isn't exciting, right? It doesn't get filmed and put out on the internet, but that one small incident does, and people see that, and they believe, unfortunately, some believe that's their perception. I can tell you from being in this field for 30-some years and from working very closely with folks like these gentlemen, that this is what law enforcement is about. It's a very honorable, admirable. I wouldn't do it because it's scary, you know? I mean, and sometimes you have to have that calling for it, but it is still a very respected, and we need to remember that as a society, that what folks do on a day-to-day basis isn't what we're seeing because it's not, you know, flashy.
Yeah. I read recently that we're hardwired to seek the difficulties and the sad stories and the problems and things like that, and hence newscasts will lead with that stuff, but it has something to do with, you know, running away from dinosaurs and things like that. But either way, I'm going to offer this to any of the three of you, but I'd love to hear from all three of you about it. And understand today, I'm not necessarily going to ask the questions that would have come straight out of your textbook. And if you think, well, where'd that question come from? I simply would tell you, consider the source. You're given the gift of meeting with the new recruits as they are graduating from, they're graduating from, or graduated by their particular academy or et cetera. You can equip their utility belt with one thing. And understand that one thing could be, for example, strong conviction, principles, a credo to live by and never forget, etc. What would you equip them with? One thing.
Ooh.
I've got a quick answer.
Go ahead.
Ability to communicate. Words matter.
Makes sense.
I would agree. Communication's great. I think that is she has a wonderful answer there. I would say if I can't use that answer, I'd probably say patience.
Makes sense too.
That's why I jumped in first.
You know what? It's telling that two of you have already said communication. Get that on the belt. Go ahead.
I'm just going to go with them, not because it's an easy answer, but because it's true. If they've made it through the academy, then we know they already have the work ethic. We know they have the integrity. We know they have the character. But with your communication, you can relay truth. You can adjust someone's attitude. You can de-escalate situations, and you can communicate what needs to be said and be that calm in the moment to give clarity to chaos. So I think they nailed it.
Clarity to chaos. I read recently, when it comes to policing, there was a reference to a higher standard of neutrality. How do you respond when you hear that? A higher standard of neutrality might be necessary nowadays when it comes to policing. And I interpreted it as, you know, we need to more than ever be able to remain neutral. And Josh talked eloquently last year about, I'm not going to even try and paraphrase it, doing one's job with grace. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay, and you're shaking your head. But I wondered if that's somewhere along the lines with it, a higher standard of neutrality.
The term is kind of new for me as far as higher standard of neutrality. There's a lot of things, if you go into law enforcement, that you remain neutral on. For example, when I put this uniform on, I'm still Josh, I'm still dad, I'm still husband, I'm still uncle, but in this uniform, I'm apolitical. If I agree with your beliefs or I don't believe with your or agree with your beliefs, I'm still going to serve you 100%. If I look like you, if I don't look like you, I'm going to serve you 100%. If you're causing a problem and you're breaking the law, I'll call you sir or ma'am. If you're complying with the law, I'll call you sir or ma'am. So in those standpoints, there's that part of me that although I have my personal beliefs and convictions, that doesn't come out through this badge. This badge tells you I'm going to treat everybody exactly the same. So from neutrality, from that context, I would say yes, neutral in those points. When you talk about the grace, some excellent advice that was given to me as a young man was when you get into law enforcement, exercise your authority with grace. Just because you can write a ticket doesn't mean you have to. Just because you can make that arrest doesn't mean you have to. Look at the big picture. A brief example. one of these new young men or women, when they hit law enforcement, they might get dispatched to someone who just broke a window. Oh, malicious destruction of property, I'm arresting you. Step back. What's really going on here? Is this a medical issue? Is it a psychological issue? Maybe do they have some medications that help them stay leveled out that are not? So if I just grab that person, put handcuffs on them, and take them to the jail, did I miss an opportunity to see a bigger picture and help fix another problem in their life that may prevent these issues in the future? So as far as neutrality from a sign of weakness or not being willing to engage, I'll never be that guy. But neutrality from the standpoint that I'm here to protect you and be fair, not to push my agenda, I would agree with it from that point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can even go past that. I mean, that was a wonderful answer.
Well, that's why he's here.
No, I would just say a important person. My first field training officer said to me, and on the same notion with handling things with grace, is it's better to go home wishing you had wrote somebody a ticket than to go home wishing you hadn't. And so when at the end of the day, as Lieutenant Later said, not everybody here deserves a ticket. Not everybody here deserves a verbal warning. That's part of what you have to evaluate in this career and in this policing situation that you're going into. And we hire you because we know you have that ability to problem solve. And I just recently told a new probationary conservation officer this. Every situation you run into is going to be slightly different. You're not going to address a situation and be able to fit the next situation into that same box. It may be a drunk driving that you want to put back in that same box of the one you just had, but it's going to be slightly different, and you need to roll with the punches and make a different decision or alter your conduct slightly. And it goes down to what he was saying, reference. It could be a medical issue. It could be a psychological issue. Those are all things that you're not just the police officer anymore. You're also the community policing. I don't want to say you're not a social worker, but at the same time, you have to evaluate that aspect of things.
That's got to be challenging. I mean, I don't know that there can be that much training that could fully prepare you for that.
For me, from what I see, is it starts at the top in these organizations. So these two gentlemen being lieutenants, when people do come in, when they see from the top what it means to be in these organizations and know that that's the expectation from the time they're hired till hopefully they move through their career in those organizations. I believe it's very much, as Lieutenant Later stated, the difference between, and I guess I've never heard the statement and I'm just kind of in awe by it, law enforcement versus policing. And yes, I can come in and say, you've violated the law and you're going to go to jail for this, and the problem is solved. But it's not, because that wasn't the problem that existed. So it takes more time, but it's better for society. And so when we look at what this career is about, not only being the safety aspect of society, but the safety from what does this individual mean? We look at the laws, this law, and you violated this, so this is the consequence. They're human beings. Every person that these gentlemen deal with on a daily basis is a human being, and to take that time up front. And I can tell you from being in the courtroom and seeing people, and I'll just say, my experience of watching, cameras of people get arrested, they're begging, don't arrest me, you're going to ruin my life, this is the worst thing that's going to happen. And law enforcement officers, police officers need to do their job, and then we move through the system, and at the end, I hear so often when policing is done right all along, they've come up and shook the hand of the officer and said, you did change my life. The arrest, that incident was needed, and then the process works. So at every stage that a person touches the criminal justice field, from the initial contact, if there is an arrest, through the court system, every one of those touches is an opportunity to change that person's life. So again, looking at the field of corrections, criminal justice, all the other things that we can be doing, but to still come from the same mindset of we're here to serve the people.
Okay. I want to touch on a couple of things that, or a couple of couple of questions that might be not as easy, and I'll just leave it at that. Number one, well, partly because you guys, the three of you were leading to this, and this question actually came in to me. And I'm saying this as the elder statesman here, statesperson, as we get older, we tend to become more firmly entrenched in our ways. If we believe things, we tend to, and I know I'm generalizing, but we tend to gravitate towards that, recognizing too that, and partly because of the internet, people want to matter, people want to be heard. How do you handle that as part of a team or as leaders of a team? And I guess I'm saying, and that was a long way of saying, you've got somebody that you know is prejudiced. How do you handle it? I mean, Josh, I know you're not going to sit here and look me in the eye and say none of my troopers are prejudiced in any way. Well, you might, and I would happily agree, but go ahead.
I know I have one particular trooper I disagree completely with because he's a U of M fan. I'm a Spartan, so I understand the concept.
You know I'm a U of M guy, by the way.
I know. I had to get. Hey, we all love the Lakers, though, so I'm happy.
Good answer.
So I don't get kicked out if I say that. No. The biggest thing, as far as the first part of your question, as we get older, we do get entrenched. And I think there's some things we can actively do. And I know for a group of 17 and 18-year-old young men and women, they're thinking, he's 45. He's older than dirt. He's already entrenched. But I will tell you, one thing I've learned for myself, and I'll pick on myself, I read a lot. I'm reading 3 books all the time. Every month I read 3 to 5 books. I don't just read books I know I agree with. I read books where I know I may disagree with the author because, number one, I may find something and go, I was wrong on that. I may find something and say, I still don't agree, but I understand their logic and I can communicate at a clear, articulate level with the next person because I know how they think. So that's one way to guard against it. The other way to guard against that for myself is I have my partner at work, my second lieutenant. I ask him on a weekly basis. We sit down and I say, what are my blind spots? Am I doing anything that's rubbing people the wrong way? Have I made any decisions that are inconsistent with what I say I'm going to do as far as a man of integrity? Is there anything I'm doing that's going against my own strategic plan? Is there anywhere I'm being insensitive to what's going on? And he has permission to say, this is a blind spot. Or when you said this, it didn't work out. He goes to the sergeants and says, what are my blind spots? The sergeants go to the troopers and say, what are my blind spots?
That's good.
So an open willingness to give the people that you trust around you permission to say, you know, hey, Josh, you're spot on here, here, and here, but here's a rough edge. You got to kind of file that burr off a little bit. So from that context, how I check myself, those are ways I try to do that. As far as in policing, from the very start, 17, 18 years old, just look at yourself and say, am I objective on things? Is there anything in my head that when I look at something, I just jump to a conclusion a certain way? Society would like us to believe that that's based on socioeconomic status or race or things like that. It's generally not. There's things that you probably have in your head that may be a small implicit bias. It's not a big thing, but it may be the case. For me, I grew up in a small farm community. If I drive by a field and I see a bunch of 18, 19-year-old guys on wagons throwing hay, I think, those are hard workers, they're conscientious, they're willing to get work done, they're probably saving money for their football cleats. It's a conclusion I jump to. In that case, it's an okay conclusion to jump to. I see that, I think they're hard workers. But on the flip side, in our lives growing up, we may have established something where we see a different thing going on and jump to a different conclusion. Make sure that when you look at a situation, you ask yourself, am I emotionally stepping back and reading the situation to see it as it really is, or do I jump to a conclusion before I even look? I think those things will help us stay on track.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's also something that a lot of governments are looking at now from a standpoint of equity, inclusion. They're immersing their people with these topics. I mean, we're sitting in these meetings all the time, reference these things. I mean, we in our agency have hired more female conservation officers than ever in the last few years, and part of the reason is because they're out there. There are women hunting and fishing boating and riding four-wheelers, and they're there. And that's primarily what we enforce, those type of activities. But we weren't finding them. We weren't getting to them. And that was our fault. And part of that wasn't so much, I think, the bias of our guys saying only men can do this job. It wasn't. I think it was, that's how it's always been done. So I think you have to tell yourself, immerse your people in different perspectives and always learn from what you're doing, because your way is not always the right way. And like Lieutenant later said, he asks his people that what are my blind spots? My favorite one is the officers run, and I know he made mention to this too, the officers, if you give them what they need, they will make your agency look good. It's not the administrators that make the agency look good. I mean, I call myself quite often the glorified UPS guy with a gun, because I'm just giving them the stuff that they need, right? And then they're going out and effectively doing what they're supposed to be doing. Sure. Now, there's checks and balances that you have to make in there, but ultimately, immerse them with the things that are going to make them better people, the education, the equity, the inclusion, all the things to make them better. And you may have one or two, as Karen said, bad apples that pop here and there, but you can't control that. Everybody has a little bit of things here and there, but you have to give them the tools to make themselves better. Mm-hmm.
And I would say, coming from the legal side of this, lawyers, if they're doing their job right, come from facts and a good debate and logic. And so when we think we have someone, or we're communicating with someone who may have a bias, we need to understand, first off, what is the bias, have that open communication, and quite frankly, is it us who is not understanding the situation, to be able to say, someone says something you think you disagree with, and rather than just saying, I'm right and you're wrong, to take the time to have that conversation, to understand the other person's side, to listen, and then engage in that logical, and as long as you're dealing with facts and logic and truthfully, no, I think, I feel, I believe. I always tell my students that if you start your sentence with I think, I feel, I believe, you're not coming from facts and logic. So keep it that way and get a better understanding and be able to change your own thinking. We do not. We've got a lot of experience and have been doing this a long time. I will sit here and say that doesn't mean that I am right in my thinking, and very open, especially when we cross generations, very open to engage in that conversation and learn and change my thinking and my beliefs, and we need to always be developing that skill.
Good deal. Dean Fisher, do you have any blind spots, do you think? She's always honest. Beth, from now on, as long as I know you, I'm going to say, Beth, what are my blind spots? Okay. Most, if you've paid any attention this past week, it was 10 years ago that Trayvon Martin was shot. And I said we were going to go into a couple of maybe more challenging questions. In the past 10 years, has law enforcement changed enough? And if not, why not? And if it has, how so?
I don't know if you can ever say there's a level of where they need to get to, or have they changed enough? It's ever changing, and I think it comes back to the same topic of equity, inclusion, and understanding somebody else's culture, beliefs, upbringing. As Lieutenant later said, whether it's about farms or inner cities, or it's more about getting to the root of the issue at hand, not so much a color, a sex. I think it also goes back to what Karen said, reference facts. Take everything else out of it. In the courts don't look at that background. They look at, is this justified or isn't it justified? And I think the problem is that sometimes people are guilty by public opinion before anything else. And we got to step back and remove our feelings, because like Lieutenant later said, we all have them. But step back and look at the facts. That's my opinion.
I think that Karen hit something big earlier when she said, somebody wants to take a snapshot, a video on their phone. And it's interesting because when you're going into policing, you need to understand that if someone goes to a college and they have a bad professor, they say, I didn't like that professor. If someone goes to a hospital and they don't like the bedside manner of their doctor, they say, I didn't care for that doctor. A mechanic, I don't trust that mechanic. Law enforcement is one of the few fields where one police officer, one day, in one place and time, can make a mistake or a bad choice, and people say, the police are that way. And I think that's an important concept to understand when we look at these type of issues. And so as a law enforcement officer, if I see a police officer that either made a legitimate mistake, honest mistake, or a flat-out bad decision, I don't go, wow, all police officers are like that. But what I do is if I'm going into policing, I need to look at that and have my men and women look at that and say, have we trained for that? Okay, we have. Have we practiced that? Okay, we have. Have we encountered that? Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. If we encounter that, how would we deal with it? This is a tragic situation that we hope doesn't happen again. What do I learn from that today? So if I'm in that position down the road, I'm taking that knowledge that was learned from that and I make sure that I make it better, or maybe the same decision or a better decision, or even if I have to make the same decision, I can articulate better the reasons why I made that decision. So as far as looking at law enforcement, has it changed? The lieutenant's absolutely right. It changes every day. From the time we sat down in here till the time we walk out, something in society will happen, and Karen's job and our job will have changed completely with either a person or a segment of society, and that's okay. But as far as your question, has it changed enough? I think as long as you're in policing and you're looking and saying, with what society needs today, with what my community needs today, with the individual situations that have happened in different places, if I assess the literal millions, Chris, of police contacts that will happen this month, and I realize that fatal force situations are like less than 0.7% of all police contacts, and if you look at stats and factors, if you look, like Karen said, and take emotion out of it, if you look at statistics on law enforcement use of fatal force, objectively, people would say, not why do they do that? They'd say, how in the world do they have millions of contacts with people with knives, with guns, barricaded gunmen, and only have to use force this many times? And it's usually not any statistic where you can say it's weighted against one race or another. It would really surprise people if they looked at stats.
And I have a short answer, Chris. I wrote, your question was, has law enforcement changed enough? And my answer to that is no, and my answer to that is if you're in any career and you say today is good enough, please retire. Because it's
a good point.
It's tomorrow can be better. That is the goal, in my opinion, of being actively engaged in any career, is to make tomorrow a better day than today was. It doesn't mean that we made 100 mistakes today, but at any point we can improve. And as Lieutenant later said, it's that, what's happening right now. Have we trained for it? What do we learn from it? In any career, in any profession, you should be doing that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The lead instructor for our criminal justice program here at Mid-Michigan College, Barney Ledford, regretfully couldn't be here today. He and I have talked about this, but I want to throw this one out to you three. But I don't want to paraphrase. I want to get the quote specifically. Steve Jobs, everyone likely knows Steve Jobs, he once said, if you want to make everybody happy, don't be a leader. Go sell ice cream.
Give away ice cream.
It can't be easy in law enforcement and criminal justice to be a leader, or is it? Maybe it is challenging, and hence the difficulty in answering.
We're sharing a mic, so I just don't want to be a jerk. Is leadership challenging? Absolutely it is. It's challenging. But if you get into leadership because I want to be a boss and I want to be in charge, hold on to your butt. It's going to be a tough ride because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. If you go into policing or being an attorney or whatever you want to do because I have the skill and the drive and the talent and I want to add to that because I want to serve, and then you get there and you say, for our department, I enjoy being a trooper. You know, if I train to be a sergeant, I can take care of a group of troopers. Then they give me a squad. And you take care of that squad. And every day at the end of the day, you don't care about statistics, you don't care about arrests, you don't care about events. You say, did I take care of my troopers today? And if you can say yes, then you go, that was success. And then you go, you know, if I became a second lieutenant, I could take care of 5 squads of troopers. And so you build and you study and you train and you learn how to take care of people, you learn how to lead, and you go, wow, now I get to take care of all these troops. And then where I'm at right now, I have a post. I have secretaries, I have detectives, I have commercial motor vehicle guys, polygraph guys, troopers, sergeants. Every day when I get up, I get to take care of that team. When I go on vacation, I love my time with my family. But when we get back, I look at my wife and I go, I'm looking forward to seeing the guys tomorrow because I love it. Yesterday, critical incident, you have to be the person that has trained and has been there to stay calm in the chaos and say, guys, I need you to do this, you do this, you do that, you do that. But if you can walk in as a leader and say, this place will never be perfect as long as I'm in charge because I'm not perfect. If you don't know me, give me 6 months and you know I'm here for you and I will take care of you. And if you do the right thing for the right reason, I will even put my name on the line and my career on the line to support you. Mm-hmm. That part of it's not hard because you're there for the right reason. If you just want to be a boss and it's money and rank, just go into a different field.
There's a huge difference between the term manager and leader. And I think that is the crucial point of what you're talking about here is managers tend to tell people what to do, and leaders can get that buy-in without telling people what to do. And so what Lieutenant Lader's saying is if you take care of people, people are going to take care of you. And that's what true leaders do. Are you going to be at a scene and everybody is going to always agree, as you said, everybody going to be happy with the decision you make, or is everybody going to agree? No. And you know what? If they really respect me, they'll raise their hand and tell me why they have concerns with the decision that's being made, right? Because that's fair. And if I'm a good leader, I'm going to share why we might do it that way or hear their perspective and maybe alter my opinion based on someone's experience in that field. Because, and I say this constantly in my agency, and I'm sure Lieutenant Lader says it as well, you can lead without stripes. You can lead without bars. It does not take a commander to be in charge of a situation.
Say that again?
You can lead without stripes and you can lead without bars. It does not take a commander to make the right decision. And that is wholeheartedly what I believe. You're not going to make everybody happy, and neither is the officer on the road. They're not going to make everybody happy, but at the end of the day, they have to be comfortable with their decision and move from there. So,
okay, I want to hear from you, but I deliberately asked you to reiterate that point because there's 217 and 18-year-olds listening right now. They all aren't captain of their team. They all aren't lead chair in the band. They all aren't the leader. Hence, I asked you to repeat that point because I think that's important.
One add-on to that is I actually went to a leadership forum, and I'm sure maybe Lieutenant Lader listed the same one. I believe it was a chief of police in maybe Aurora. I think it was Aurora. When they had their shooting, their mass shooting there. And the chief of police, she said in her session that we listened to, she said, I knew that I was the one that people were looking to, but I knew that my SWAT leader had the experience to handle the situation. And so it's not about being the captain of the team. It's about you may be the person who has that experience or that knowledge. You don't have to be that leader. You may have that niche, and raise your hand and share it, because good leaders are going to listen.
Want to add?
I do. I mean, much like what was said at the beginning, that public service is a calling, I think being a leader is a calling. And I absolutely agree, leaders can be situational, that You know, we have the lieutenant, and a good leader will say at any particular time, this is my person on the team who has that experience, so I'm going to, you know, assign these roles or listen to this person at this time. But the only other thing I want to add to that is if you're looking at any profession and you're thinking, I don't think at this stage I want to be a leader, that's okay. Not everybody is set out to be that. Not everyone has that calling. It doesn't mean you can't be the best trooper, the best officer in that, in a, it just happened on a TV show, and I won't say the show, but it was Travis, and if you were watching and they were asking him, you know, you're perfect for this promotion, why don't you want it? And he gave some very good explanations. Not, I'm lazy, I don't want to do this. He found his niche in that department and is very comfortable and feels that that's where he's most effective. So wherever you want to be in that department, find your niche, be the best at that. If it is leadership, maybe right now you don't see it that way, and that's okay. Maybe 10 years from now that will change, maybe it won't, and that will be okay too. But it has to be a calling into leadership, not money, because there's not enough money in the world that makes that level of sleepless nights worth it, and not titles. It's a true calling into leadership.
Good. This is good. I tell 17 and 18-year-olds, and I speak with many of them often, I tell them consistently, and I didn't 10, 20 years ago, but I tell them consistently, if you can do what you love and get paid for it, you're golden. You're blessed in 100 ways. So I'm so glad we're hearing this. Answer this next question, yes, no, or mostly. Criminal justice. Does the cream generally always, and I don't like absolutes, but does the cream generally always rise to the top? I love asking them questions that they really have to like deliberate, and I don't know. Go ahead.
Mostly?
You're honest.
I notice you're limiting us to one word.
Well,
Yeah, I would say mostly as well. Piggybacking off the last question, with proper leadership,
yeah.
with poor leadership, people come out and they go, oh, you were ranked first and second in your class, so you're going to be a sergeant or lieutenant someday. That's poor leadership. That's a manager. With good leadership, you may recognize that that person with no law enforcement, no military, didn't come from a law enforcement family, maybe we're middle of the pack in their academy, but we're giving it their all. You look at that person, you develop them, you give them the opportunity to learn, and the cream of the crop may not be what the rankings say coming out of recruit school, but ultimately, if you identify those diamonds in the rough, they're the cream of the crop. You just have to be able to see it.
Josh, I did say yes, no, or mostly.
Mostly yes, sometimes no.
It's okay. What do you want to add?
See all the above.
The legal definition, I'd want to know what the cream is and what the
Oh my goodness.
Without having an understanding of that, it would be.
I love Karen Bean.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
If
object to the question.
fair enough. You're entitled to that.
Sustained.
If I were teaching marketing, a must-read book for me would be, and I'm looking at the dean who oversees the business department, who has done a magnificent job with that, amongst a number of other programs here at Mid. A must-read book for me would be Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point. Are you familiar with it? Okay. What's a must-read, a must-see, a documentary, a movie, a book? Anything jump out off the top of your head? You really should see this documentary, or you should read this book, or this publication is a must-have, or this movie really told the story accurately. Anything? And if you don't, that's okay. I never said I was going to ask, questions you'd have an answer to.
3 to 5 books a week, you've got to have good ones.
I literally have a leadership library at the Post. I have stacks of books at my house.
Good. I
would say if you're a student that's at Mid and you're not sure what area of policing you're going into, or maybe not policing, I would say read Simon Sinek's Infinite Game. because it's not just about rank, it's not just about keeping our shareholders happy or my professor happy with my grade today. It's what is the ultimate end game, playing for the long haul. Am I going to leave whatever my chosen occupation is better because I was here? Do I have a legacy? As far as criminal justice or policing, I would say anything you can get your hands on that says Jocko Willink on it, and leadership strategies and tactics would be a great start.
Say it again.
Jocko Willink. Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, former Navy SEALs. They literally rewrote the leadership training program for the United States Navy SEALs. He has a podcast. He has leadership books. He writes leadership books for kids. Anything these young men and women can get their hands on would be phenomenal to have.
Jocko Willing. Cool stuff. Anything else? It's okay.
I'm going to punt on that one also. But as far as what to not to watch, or what to watch with the very critical
Good point.
eye, is in general any news story, and I want to just focus on that. The news's goal, it's positive, it's to get us information, but it's to get us information from their lens and from their angle. And I'm not saying that they're doing it in any malicious way, but when we watch something, I want people to ask themselves, does this make sense? Does this follow what I think happened, or what I've heard other areas? And the best way to do that is to look someplace else and try and validate and verify it. So when we hear something or see something anywhere, does it make sense? Is this, what my expectation was? And then try and find it someplace else before you post it on social media and say to everyone, look at what happened. Because once it's out there, that's you're adding to what could be a falsehood. So just be very careful with what they see. Sure.
This has been really worthwhile, and we're running lower on time. We're rounding that final turn in the mile, 1,600 meter. Boy, I hesitate to even go here, because we probably should spend an hour just talking, and I know we touched on it last year. Like any profession, but besides teachers and nurses who make a monumental commitment, law enforcement, policing, the attention to health and wellness maybe is more important than ever. What would you say? Is that something that you are very deliberate about?
So personally, I have a huge feeling that not just physical health, fitness. I mean, I'm at the gym every day. I should say probably 6 out of 7 days a week. And it's not just about, being faster, being stronger. It's about your mental well-being. When you answer so many calls in a day, you need your time. And whether that is a walk, a run, an hour at the gym, you need something to separate that time. And to me, fitness is important. I mean, if you go to the State Police Academy, you're going to see signs all over that academy that say, when you choose law enforcement, you are no longer able to be unfit, or whatever the signs say in those facilities. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that comes not just with physical fitness, but mental fitness as well. So
I agree completely. If you're part of a CTE program looking at policing, it is 100% physical fitness, emotional fitness, spiritual fitness, and those three things have to be present. If you're physically fit and there's an emergency and you're able to pull someone to safety, that's great. But if you're not emotionally fit, where you can actually deal with that trauma of that situation in a healthy way and talk to someone if you need to, and maintain that balance with your family, your spouse, your children, significant other, there's going to be a fault line somewhere else that's going to crack. So I would definitely say all three of those areas, the physical, spiritual, and emotional aspects, have to be a priority through the duration of your career. It doesn't say when you choose law enforcement you lose the right to be unfit for the first 10 years. Okay, when I got 24 years in, when I show up on a scene, I don't want my guys to go, oh, now we got to carry him. I want them to go, oh, good, the lieutenant's here, things just got easier. Yeah. That's my responsibility to them. Yeah. And to you as citizens.
Yep.
And just to wrap all of that up, or to add to it, the outside of those, and in addition to the support system that we need, I think is very important. So yes, we can be physically fit and mentally and spiritually, and those are very important. But I know when I have a really, really bad day or a tough situation, I'm going to come home and my spouse is there, and I'm going to be able to have that safe environment with that sound, and very important. So find whomever your support system is, whether it's your best friend, your pastor, your spouse.
Yeah.
Find that person, and that's the safe area. And I think having that will bring all those things, package them up nicely as a survival kit for our mental well-being.
Okay. Here's another one that I really don't want to give short shrift to, but I also don't want to not ask. Does the United States need a governing body or a national commission to give a good hard look to criminal justice?
I would say we have a really good one. The United States Constitution is amazing. Our Supreme Court system does its job. That's my point blank honest answer. I think that every state, every county, every municipality has very, very unique needs. And like anything else, if we start painting with a very wide brush, everybody do it this way. We wouldn't do it with construction. Build every house this way. Yeah. Your house is in California. My house is in Alaska. Her house is in Michigan. It doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And so as far as the core things that we will not waver on, those are in the United States Constitution. They're in the constitutions for our states. They're in our laws, which are people, elected people that they chose to make those laws. We choose our judges to make sure they interpret those laws and fine-tune them if they need to. So I would say that's in place. That's just my humble opinion, though.
I'm still listening.
No, I would just add to that that court system is also broken up, not only the Supreme Court, but, the U.S. Court of Appeals are, I guess, sectioned throughout the United States as well. And you're bound by your Circuit Court of Appeals, not California or someone else. So that system's that Lieutenant Lader's talking about is already there. It's already in place to judge you based on those factors.
I absolutely agree. While I said earlier, anything can be improved, everything can be improved. I think looking at the improvements that we need to start at those local levels. Local law enforcement, local policing, local police officers, they know what they need. They know what their departments, where they lack and where things can be better. To put it up at a national level is not the solution.
Okay, this is good. And speaking of local level, I'm going to call you out right now. Shepherd football, Allegan basketball, Gladwin wrestling, Midland softball. Gladwin soccer saw it the right way a few years ago and recognized law enforcement. And I'm wondering if there needs to be a little bit more of that around the world. Shepherd football ever do that? Lieutenant Lader, you didn't answer. Shepherd football get anything like that together? I shouldn't do that to him.
I donated a quarterback and Mike linebacker to their program for a number of years.
Yes,
so.
you did. I heard he was pretty okay. Okay.
Well played.
We've got just a moment. I said I would offer this. Final thoughts? Anything you wouldn't want them to walk away with without hearing it from you?
I would say just thank you to young men and women who are thinking about any part of law enforcement. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of these programs. And I would truly encourage you, if you think you know what you want to do, I would like to be a prosecutor, I'd like to be a conservation officer, I'd like to be a trooper, whatever it may be, find a person who's doing it and say, this is what I think it is. Does that match what it really is? And get advice from them so that you can find out what you think you're working so hard towards is confirmed to be what you really want. And if you do that, when you get there, it'll be a great ride. So thanks for giving us your time.
Yeah, I would reiterate that. I mean, just always, even when you finish your programs, even when you get through your college, always keep your mind open and learn from whatever experiences you have. So whether that be doing those ride-alongs that Lieutenant Later's talking about with the agency that you feel like you want to go into, to going into a field training program and taking the steps that it takes to move forward from there. Just constantly keep your mind open to always learn, and if this is your calling, then keep moving forward. We need you, because we're struggling with getting bodies at times, and if this is how you want to serve your career, it's a lifestyle, not just a career. But definitely, from my perspective, you'll enjoy it.
I reiterate that, and thank you for wanting to serve in this field. It isn't for everyone, and I understand that. Again, no guns, no hardware, and so to recognize that there's other areas in the criminal justice field that outside of corrections and police officers, to have that calling into other areas. But the one thing I want to say, especially to the group we're talking to, is you'll have teachers and professors and other folks, guest lecturers who come into your classrooms. Take the opportunity to ask those people, absolutely, if you can get a ride along or get into an organization and ask those questions. Your professors and your teachers are your frontline people to say, you've got experience in this area, what did it mean to you, what would it really be like? I spent 30 some years as a college student, and it took me a good amount of that time to understand that those professors really meant it. It might seem daunting and, I don't want to take the time to do that. We want you to have that understanding, and we love to engage in the conversation with you. And if you find one who doesn't, move on, because 99.9% of the rest of them do engage in the conversation and understand how wonderful of a career this can be if it's your calling.
Good points, all. Okay, we're back again at 1 o'clock today for a similar conversation. Then, same spot, we'll be back on March 16th. Dr. Zambo from the Michigan State Police, correct? Dr. Zambo, who is a criminal profiler, is coming to have some conversation. We'll have an even bigger live audience for that, but you are certainly invited and welcome. That'll be some scintillating conversation. I'm looking forward to it. And then finally on March 24th, I have some special guests. It'll be a little bit different tone to the conversation. I'll just leave it at that, but it'll be a good one, I assure you. Thank you for being part of this. And here's what I will leave you with, 17 and 18-year-olds. In a very polite, respectful way, at some point today, before you leave, go thank that teacher in your classroom. Likely they've got some CJ experience as well, so thank them for that, and thank them for doing what they're doing currently. Anything else? Okay. Thanks for being part of this.
Nicely done, guys. Good job. Well done.
As always.
They were extraordinary.